Happy Monday, gamers. It is another modern Magic Mondays adventure here with Simic Infect versus Eldrazi Ramp, two decks that we've seen on camera before multiple times, but we're back again. And it's also a really exciting day because it's ban list day, something a lot of people have been waiting for. This video is, of course, recorded up before the actual ban list is released, and it's scheduled to release on the day of the ban list. So as of the time that this is released, the ban list probably hasn't been announced yet. Usually it's going to be like an hour or two, give or take, after the videos go up. But, you know, we'll kind of get into it. And we've had our speculations. We know something's happening to the One Ring. Either it's going to get banned. I still hope it's restricted. I'm like, it's a flavor win. It's a, you know, it's still a powerful card, but it gives people the ability to still utilize it and actually have a downside where there currently is no downside. Yeah, the blanket like protection is annoying, and that one turn fog effect does often like make a difference, but actually having a downside of they're taking damage and stuff, I don't know. I feel like it's worth experimenting with, right? Make it the first restricted card in Modern. In the match we got right now, Venerated Rot Priests are coming out. Nothing too crazy. They do care. I wish Venerated Rot Priests, every time I see it and still utilize it, I wish it said spell or ability, because there's so much stuff now that it's like, oh, here's a cast trigger. Here's this ability taking place, and it doesn't actually give your opponent a poison counter. Like, Wizards of the Coast really keeps Infect and Poison in check as much as possible. You know, Toxic is like baby version Infect. It's, I don't know. I like Venerated Rot Priest. We went back to Phyrexia, and like Venerated Rot Priest was the only like playable Infect related card for Modern. No updated playable cards. Like, for a little bit there was like a standard deck, right? Bant, Toxic and stuff like that, but like, I don't know. It's tough. You can't really viably play Infect in Pioneer, so it's like it's sad times. But let's talk more about the ban list, because again, it's speculation period here based on when we're recording this and when the actual ban list is coming out. We do know stuff's going to get banned from Boros Energy. I say we know because it's the best deck. It's been the best deck since Nadu went away. It's once Grief went away, the big spike and surge in the kind of Necro dominance decks disappeared. They fell off, right? Not having that added like threat, added disruption, it like really tanked, and you don't really see it at all. Every now and again you'll see maybe like a Cabal Coffer style, and people will still experiment with it, but it's nowhere near the consistency or power level that it needs to be. The Tron-based decks or Eldrazi-based decks that are currently running the One Ring are going to be having to pivot and do something a little different. I don't know if they're going to be focusing more on like a Brood Scale combo style of play. Like, that's going to be interesting to see those types of decks and how they go. Like, Jeskai Energy or Jeskai Control is going to be one of those ones that's like, oh, okay, how are you going to survive this? Are you going to be... the One Ring made a big difference for those types of decks of just like protection, card advantage, stuff like that. I mean, I guess you'll have to pivot a little bit, but it's tough. It's going to be tough for the Jeskai Control list to stay relevant in the top of the meta. But we definitely have that kind of tiered system within Modern. And speaking of tiered system, we have the Karn coming out revealing some really powerful artifacts from the sideboard. Chalice of the Void being one of them. And now it's basically like a tiny little window here to get something done. Interesting. Okay. I'm looking at this board state right here. Lava Spur Boots is on the battlefield. Lava Spur Boots gives a creature haste and ward 1. 1 mana activate Ink Moth. No, that's not okay. Never mind. I was like, do I have enough mana to do it? No, we don't. We're dumping everything into these because we can't even activate Lava Spur Boots because of Karn's no artifacts can be activated. So we're dumping all these spells in here to push for damage. Here we go. 5 going here, 6 going here. 2 additional poison counters going off. Every spell that we get gives 2, so that's of course gonna chip that up really quickly. Just trying to count up and see was there a world that we could have gotten lethal there? No, there was not a world for that. But now that that's gone, we can do some Lava Spur Boots shenanigans here and hope for the best. Set ourselves in a nice spot, and there is removal in hand and a 1 ring here. So again, if we're watching this and 1 ring is banned, that happens. We've got plenty of games. Like we have Boros Energy games in the queue. We have lots of Eldrazi based decks that run at the 1 ring. So I'm really curious to see, is the 1 ring banned or is it just restricted? And some of these gameplay stuff are still acceptable and viable to be able to show. But here's where things really kind of do the lockout adventures of Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void enters with X charge counter, so we paid 2 mana to have it enter with 1, and then it's going to counter anything that costs 1 mana. And 1 ring comes out. We'll do some drawing. We did some life total mismatches here, and we eventually updated. There was some at some point life totals get messed up here, but push for damage. Oh, that's where we missed the damage there, right? We increased the poison counter, but we forgot to be like, oh, you're taking 3 damage here. So you essentially take 4, go to 8, right? Take 3 damage off it. The 1 ring triggers. You'll lose a life. Yeah, so we're missing. We mess up and miss a little bit of the life. Yeah, then it's like, oh, wait, he loses 1 for the 1 ring. But we missed the 3 damage that came across last turn. So I think we eventually fix it. I think because at one point when I was going back through the VOD and was editing, the players were nice enough at one point to be like, after a life total change, they go, oh, I'm at 8, right? Or, you know, and there's the Fire Spout. Old school card. For those that didn't play back when Tron used to be a red-green deck, this used to be a really powerful thing. But we're going to do a Vines. Now, there is a challenge to be able to counter it, but the main use of this is to try to pump and just get poison counters to our opponent. Because even though it's going to counter, we're still targeting it. When a creature becomes targeted, boom, we're going to make sure that they get the extra counter there. Now we have the hope of trying to finish our opponents off. We've gotten them to 8, so now we can try to do the Ink Moth activation of Lava Spur Boots, equip, and swing in for 2. Because we can't really... The deck is basically 1-drop deck, with the exception of Blighted Agent. Some lists still run a Become Immense. It's few and far between at this point. It's perfectly fine. I was testing out Lava Spur Boots, doing some experimentation, because again, the meta is going to be shifting, and so I'm already starting to experiment with decks like this, those fast, crazy decks. And this is a way to just kind of shut down any, worrisome creatures with that little bit of Kozilek's Command there. Kozilek's Command is like one of the best spells printed for colorless decks. All right, so we're hoping to draw into something to kind of close the game out, but actually, we have something. You see the math, you see the finger count in here. We have a Emrakul in hand. So that's going to be the, all right, how are we going to close the game out? Well, we're going to put this 13/13 flying monstrosity onto the battlefield, and it does cost less based on the number of cards or card types and stuff like that in your graveyard. So, hey, we're going to attempt to cast this Utopian Sprawl, which will be countered by Chalice of the Void, giving us an additional count for reducing the cost of Emrakul. So nice little line there from our Eldrazi Ramp player. Yeah, costs 1 less to cast for each card type. Of course, Utopian Sprawl is an enchantment, making this a little bit easier to cast here. And we do get the little setup here where we get to take control of our opponent during their next turn. All right, so this is our hand. Lots of 1-drops. So yeah, a lot of times people will just scoop up at that point when they're like, well, I'm locked out. There's no possible ways that I'm coming back in this situation. And that makes total sense. A lot of times, if you're in the situation, wait and see what the threat is, what's going to try to kill you. In this case, we know what it's going to be. It's going to be the Emrakul, the Promised End here. So, like, once that's down, you can also, like, scoop up when they go to take your turn, so you keep information hidden. It's locals. It doesn't matter as much. I'm perfectly fine playing with my buddy and being able to, like, yep, let's kind of let you do your thing. I'd like to cast this Noble Hierarch. Yeah, we're joking around. He says, "Yep." I was like, "Oh, so you let me have this?" And then he points at the chalice of like, "Nope, you may not have this." So yeah, just a little bit of messing around there between two buddies. So we do get the cleanup there of the Emrakul double attack to 1 turn, follow up turn. There it is. Gotcha. So now we get to go into sideboarding stuff, which helps out a little bit, especially at our LGS, or just like if you're running blue. Pretty much everybody is taking advantage of that lovely little counterspell. Consign to Memory is like the go-to one to be utilizing. And we're going to be seeing what sort of sideboard stuff is available, because again, the Karn-based decks are toolbox decks that care about having a bunch of different artifacts in their sideboard that they can be able to tutor up using Karn's ability. So your sideboard is not necessarily stuff that you're going to want to board in, as opposed to things that you can grab in the middle of the game. All right, mulligan to 6, but we've got a Glistener Elf to start things out, taking a damage. And this is a nice threat, knowing that your opponent can't get rid of it unless they are able to generate 2 mana right off the bat, and then they're going to dump their Kozilek's Command. Utopian Sprawl, ramping it out. Taking another point of damage to do the Might of Old Corrosa. And there's 5 damage to start things off on turn 2. And that's it, we say. Passing the turn. So we could have, like, if the reason we run Simic Infect over the Sultai or the Golgari is because turn 2 and turn 3 wins are viable. Turn 3 is much more likely than turn 2 wins. But if we had a scale up plus a might, we win. That's 10 damage. If we have a might plus a second might, or a might and a groundswell, and a mutagenic, we win, right? So it's like 2 or 3 pump spells can win on turn 2, depending on how things go. But we try to exile it, which is going to be met with the Consign to Memory that we talked about. Powerful sideboard card, which, fetching, shocking, losing some life to be able to counter and put a stop to that. And that basically is giving us the clear that, okay, shields are down. We can now try to hopefully draw a pump spell to deal 5 more damage to our opponent there. But if that resolves, like the Eldrazi spawn can block, it just makes things really difficult with the Glistener Elf line. And there's a groundswell that we were talking about. Let's clean it up there. 10 points of damage because +4/+4 for 10 total. And very quick. So turn 3 win. So now we're going into game number 3. All tied up 1-1 here. Yeah, so we do have lots of different decks. We've been showcasing a lot of different decks specifically because, we're getting ourselves prepped and ready for the ban list. And if you're looking to get back into Modern, or wanting to see like cool other decks that exist in Modern that, if you're going, well, energy is boring, or my shop is full of energy, it's probably won't be after the ban list. So what other decks are there out there? Well, take a look at all these cool decks. You could go back and play Infect again. You could sit here and play the Oculus deck. There are variations of the life gain combo decks, the Selesnya life gain decks that we've seen on camera. We've seen the Soul Trader combo decks. Of course, the different Eldrazi, both the ramps. There's been the brood scale combos, right? Like we've been seeing Indomitable Creativity. There's been Titaned lists. Like there's so many decks that exist in Modern that yes, your deck might be positioned better in a certain meta or do much better and you don't take as many wins. But if you're only playing in or at your LGS and doing the local side of things, it's okay to, play your favorite deck. Like Modern has so much depth to it compared to some other formats. Yes, a lot of the decks that used to exist pre Modern Horizons don't really exist anymore. A lot of the decks that existed during the Modern Horizons 1 don't really exist anymore. Or even decks that existed during Modern Horizons 2 don't really exist anymore. Like the Golgari decks have pivoted and shifted. Like the Yawgmoth decks still kind of exist in some variations or shape or form. Same thing with the Murktides. They have pivoted from the Izzet to the Dimir. But decks like Hammer Time, I haven't seen Hammer Time in a long time. Part of that, too, is because of how good a lot of these Eldrazi-based decks got, and having a Karn, the Great Creator, out, and just being like, hey, you can't use your equipment, and you can't use your artifacts and do things. Like, it does make it a little bit more difficult. Well, now we see kind of a setup here. Malevolent Rumble, building up a large mana count, and the Infect side of things, it's been a kind of a slow burn setup here, right? We're just like, all right, here's a bunch of lands. We went from a turn 3 win last time to now we're going to be trying to push and pump for damage here. So another Might, and we're going for a little bit of evasion with our Inkmoth Nexus. So 5 Exalted Trigger is going to put it to 6 total damage here. No blocks, going to damage. All right, attempt for the Kozilek's command. And so we have a response to it, but here's the thing. Don't rush your responses. Always wait to see, 1, how much mana they're dumping into it, and 2, what modes they're picking. Like it's easy to be like, oh, I have the counter spell or I have the protection spell. I'm going to jam it out quickly while they're resolving stuff. But it's like, just take a moment, breathe. Make sure that you're responding once they've completed all their stuff. No one's asking for slow play stuff, but it's just like double check, look it through what your options are. Now, you should know your options available. Like once you start playing and getting used to specific matchups with your deck, it becomes so much easier of going, okay, I understand that the Eldrazi list that I'm fighting against has really only one instant speed answer to things. The players used to run dismembers, and every so often you'll see some of them still have access to dismembers in the sideboard. It's not as often anymore, but it's still a thing. So it's like, that's one way to do things. Kozilek's command is the #1 instant speed answer. Otherwise, they have to do things more on sorcery speed, like using a Devourer of Destiny, which is a really powerful card. And it does get to exile something that's 1 or more colors, specifically a permanent, so not just creatures. But the threat that you're worried about here is the Inkmoth Nexus. We have quite a bit of lands and stuff in hand, but there's a basic forest. I still need to get those signed. I need to, I have signed forest, but I want those ones signed, like the actual Phyrexian ones. But there's the vines kicked. We already had dealt 6 damage, and there's the 5 damage to put our opponent to 11. So Infect has always been a good matchup for a Tron-based style of deck, one of those big mana decks like that kind of moves a little bit slower and sets up, and then they can kind of explode out the later the game goes, where we can kind of just go in fast and kind of, there are a lot of combo-y decks that exist right now in Modern, like the, going for our Goblin Charbelchers and stuff. Like, so the meta is going to be very interesting going forward. So let me know what decks you guys are going to be playing, especially if you're watching this after the ban list announcement. Tell me what you guys are going to be playing. I want to know. But we will have a ban list video coming up as well, so stay tuned for that, as well as more games on Thursday and all kinds of good stuff coming up every single week for you guys to enjoy. But that's going to do it for us here. Thanks so much for hanging out, tuning in and watching, everybody, and we'll see you all next game.